Kira Vasquez stood alone in the massive arrival hall of Galactic Integration Academy Station, and she had never felt so small in her entire life. The ceiling stretched up so high that clouds actually formed near the top, and lights floated in the air like tiny stars that someone had pulled down from space itself. And everywhere she looked, there were aliens of every shape and size and color imaginable. She was 18 years old, born and raised in São Paulo, Brazil, on a little planet called Earth that most of the galaxy had never even heard of until 2 years ago. And now here she was, the first human to ever attend the most prestigious academy in the known universe. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. But she kept her face calm and her shoulders straight because her grandmother had always told her to never let anyone see her fear. And Kira had learned that lesson well. A floating drone approached her and spoke in a mechanical voice that somehow sounded bored, asking her to follow it to the registration center. And Kira nodded and began walking through the crowded hall. That was when she first noticed the staring. Staring. Every alien she passed stopped what they were doing and turned to look at her. And their expressions were not friendly or curious or welcoming at all. No. They looked at her like she was some kind of dangerous animal that had escaped from a cage. A group of tall, thin creatures with glowing blue skin pressed themselves against the wall as she walked by, and she heard them whispering to each other in frightened voices. "Is that really a human?" one of them asked. "A Deathworlder," another whispered back. "From a Class 12 planet, can you imagine? How is it still alive? How did it survive long enough to grow that big?" Kira pretended not to hear them, but the words stuck in her mind like thorns, and she wondered what exactly a Deathworlder was and why everyone seemed so afraid of her. She was just a regular girl from Earth. Nothing special about her at all. And she had no idea why these aliens were acting like she was some kind of monster. The registration process took several hours. And by the end of it, Kira was exhausted and hungry and more confused than ever. Because every single official she spoke to had treated her with extreme caution, like she might explode at any moment. Finally, she was given her room assignment and a small device that would translate alien languages into Portuguese or English, and she was told that classes would begin the next morning. Her room was small but comfortable, with a bed that adjusted to her body shape and a window that looked out into the endless blackness of space. And Kira sat on that bed and stared out at the stars and wondered what she had gotten herself into. The next morning, she woke up early because her body was still confused about time, and she decided to explore the station before her first class began. The academy was enormous, a massive ring-shaped structure that floated in orbit around a gas giant with swirling purple clouds, and it was home to over 50,000 students from hundreds of different species. Kira walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever, past laboratories and libraries and recreation areas and dining halls. And everywhere she went, the other students moved out of her way like she was carrying some kind of disease. She tried to smile at a few of them, tried to look friendly and approachable, but they just hurried past her with their eyes down and their bodies tense. It hurt more than she wanted to admit, this constant rejection, this fear in their eyes when they looked at her. By the time she reached the main dining hall, she was feeling pretty low, and she grabbed some food from a synthesizer and found an empty table in the corner and sat down to eat alone. The food was strange, some kind of protein block that had no flavor at all, but she was too hungry to care, and she ate in silence while the massive hall buzzed with conversation all around her. That was when she saw him for the first time, the alien who would change everything. His name was Torvax Kren, and he was impossible to miss. He stood over 7 feet tall, with dark green scales covering his entire body and 4 muscular arms that ended in clawed hands. And his face was like a lizard mixed with a shark. All teeth and cold eyes and a mouth that seemed to be permanently twisted into a cruel smile. He was a Dralith, a species known throughout the galaxy for their strength and their aggression and their belief that might made right. Torvax walked through the dining hall like he owned it, and maybe he did in a way, because Kira later learned that his family was one of the richest and most powerful in the entire galaxy, with seats on the Commerce Council and connections to every major government. Students scrambled to get out of his way, and those who were not fast enough received a shove or a slap or worse. Kira watched him move through the crowd, watched him enjoy the fear he created, and she felt something hot and angry begin to burn in her chest. But she did not say anything, not yet, because she was new here, and she did not understand the rules, and she did not want to make trouble on her second day. So she finished her tasteless meal and stood up to leave, planning to find her first classroom and maybe make a better impression there. But fate had other plans. As she was walking toward the exit, she heard a sound that made her stop in her tracks, a high-pitched squeal of pain and fear that cut through all the other noise in the hall. She turned around and saw Torvax holding a small creature by what looked like a pouch on its throat, lifting it off the ground while it kicked and struggled helplessly. The creature was a Mefari, barely 3 feet tall, with soft gray fur and big dark eyes that were now filled with tears, and it was clearly terrified. "Please," the little alien begged. "Please let me go. I did not mean to bump into you. I am sorry." Torvax just laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed through the suddenly silent hall. "You think sorry is enough?" he snarled. "You got your filth on my scales, you disgusting little bottom feeder, and now you are going to pay for it." He raised one of his other hands, claws extended, ready to strike the helpless Mefari across the face. And Kira Vasquez, the first human to ever attend Galactic Integration Academy, the girl from the death world that everyone feared, made a decision that would change her life forever. She started walking toward them. The dining hall had gone completely silent, and every single alien in the room was watching as Kira walked toward Torvax Kren with steady steps and a calm face. Her sneakers made soft sounds on the metal floor, and her heart was beating fast. But her hands were steady, and her breathing was even because she had been trained to stay calm under pressure. Back on Earth, she had spent 12 years learning how to fight, starting with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when she was 6 years old and adding Krav Maga when she was 12. And her instructors had always said that the most important skill was not strength or speed, but the ability to stay calm when everything around you was chaos. She stopped about 10 feet away from Torvax, close enough to see the fear in the little Mefari's eyes, close enough to smell the strange reptilian scent coming from the massive Dralith. "Hey," she said, and her voice came out clear and strong, filling the silent hall. "Put them down." Torvax turned his head slowly to look at her, and his yellow eyes narrowed with surprise and then amusement. He had probably never been challenged before, Kira realized. Not here at the academy where his family's name protected him, not anywhere in his privileged life. "The Deathworlder speaks," he said, and his voice was deep and rough like rocks grinding together. "I was wondering when you would do something interesting, little mammal." He dropped the Mefari carelessly onto the floor, and the small creature scrambled away on all fours, too scared to even stand up properly. Then Torvax turned his full attention to Kira, and he spread all 4 of his arms wide in what was obviously meant to be an intimidating display of size and strength. He was huge, she had to admit that, probably 3 times her weight and covered in scales that looked as hard as armor. And his claws were long and sharp and clearly designed for tearing flesh. But Kira had grown up watching nature documentaries about crocodiles and Komodo dragons and all the other reptiles that Earth had produced. And she knew that size was not everything. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Torvax asked, taking a step toward her with a smile that showed all of his many teeth. "Someone who picks on people half his size," Kira replied without backing away. which tells me everything I need to know about you." A gasp went through the watching crowd, and Kira could see aliens covering their mouths and grabbing each other in shock. Apparently no one talked to Torvax Kren that way, but Kira was not from this galaxy, and she did not care about his family name or his money or his connections. Where she came from, a bully was a bully, and you did not let bullies win. Torvax's smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of cold anger that made his scales seem to darken. "Your species has been in space for 2 rotations," he growled, stepping closer until he was looming over her. "You do not even have faster than light travel yet. You are primitive and weak, and you should be on your knees thanking the Council for letting you leave your pathetic little rock." "My pathetic little rock produced every ancestor I have ever had," Kira said calmly, looking up at him without fear. "With billions of years of evolution, billions of years of survival, and here I am standing in front of you without shaking. So maybe you should reconsider who is weak." Another gasp from the crowd, louder this time. Torvax leaned down until his face was only inches from hers, and she could see her own reflection in his cold reptilian eyes. "On my world," he hissed, "we eat creatures like you. We hunt them for sport and mount their skulls on our walls." Kira did not flinch, did not blink, did not look away. "On my world," she replied in a quiet voice that somehow carried through the entire hall. "We hunted things bigger than you for sport, and we did it before we even invented fire. We chased them until they collapsed from exhaustion, and then we ate them with our bare hands. And we have been doing it for 2 million years." The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. Torvax straightened up, and for just a moment Kira saw something flicker in his eyes, something that might have been uncertainty. But then his pride took over, because predators like him could not show weakness, could not back down from a challenge, especially not from a small mammal that barely came up to his chest. "You are either very brave or very stupid," he said, cracking the knuckles on all 4 of his hands. "And I think I am going to find out which one." "I think you should walk away," Kira said. And there was something in her voice now, something ancient and dangerous that she had inherited from 100,000 generations of survivors. "Because if you do not, you are going to regret it." He laughed at that, a booming sound that echoed off the walls. "Regret it?" He repeated. "Little human, I'm going to break every bone in your soft little body, and then I am going to hang you outside my quarters as a warning to anyone else who thinks they can talk to me that way." The crowd began to back away, pressing against the walls, climbing on tables, doing anything to get out of the way of what was about to happen. A few of them were recording with their personal devices, and Kira knew that whatever happened next would be seen by millions of beings across the galaxy. She also knew that security would not come to help her, because Torvax's family probably owned them too, and she was alone here, completely alone, the only human for light years in any direction. But she was not afraid. Her ancestors had faced saber-toothed cats with nothing but sharpened sticks, had fought cave bears in the darkness with their bare hands, had survived ice ages and volcanic winters and plagues and wars and everything else that the universe could throw at them. She was the product of 4 billion years of relentless, brutal evolution on a planet that seemed designed to kill everything on it, and she had been trained since childhood in the art of combat. Torvax Kren was big and strong and scary, but he had never faced anything like her before. He did not know what was coming. "Last chance," Kira said, settling her weight onto the balls of her feet, feeling her body shift into a ready stance without even thinking about it. "Walk away." Torvax's answer was to roar with rage and swing his upper right arm toward her head. His claws extended, moving faster than any creature his size should have been able to move. It was a blow designed to kill, or at least to cripple, and it would have worked on almost any other species in the galaxy. But Kira Vasquez was not any other species. She was human, and humans were something special. 10 seconds was all it took to change everything. 10 seconds that would be studied and analyzed and discussed across the entire galaxy for years to come. 10 seconds that would make humanity famous. The first second began when Torvax's clawed hand started moving toward Kira's head, cutting through the air with enough force to crush bone and tear flesh. He was fast, incredibly fast for a creature his size, and his species had evolved as apex predators on their home world, built for sudden explosive bursts of violence. But Kira's nervous system was a miracle of biological engineering, the result of billions of years of evolution on a planet where slow meant dead. Her brain processed the incoming attack in milliseconds, sending signals down her spine at nearly 400 feet per second. And her body began reacting before she even consciously understood what was happening. The second saw her entire body drop and twist, her knees bending and her torso rotating away from the incoming blow with a fluid grace that looked almost supernatural. Torvax's claws passed through the space where her head had been just a heartbeat ago, missing her by less than an inch, and she could feel the wind of his swing ruffle her dark hair. In the third second, while Torvax was still completing his failed attack, Kira's left hand shot up and grabbed his wrist. Her grip was like iron, her fingers finding the sensitive spots between his scales where the nerves ran close to the surface, and she squeezed with a strength that surprised even her. Torvax's eyes went wide with shock because no creature had ever grabbed him like that before. No creature had ever dared, and the pain shooting up his arm was unlike anything he had experienced. The fourth second was when Kira planted her feet and pivoted, using Torvax's own momentum against him in a classic judo throw that her instructors back in Snow Paulo would have been proud of. She turned her hips and pulled his arm across her body, and suddenly all of his weight and all of his forward motion was working against him instead of for him. In the fifth second, Torvax Kren's feet left the ground. It should have been impossible. A girl who weighed maybe 130 pounds throwing a creature who weighed over 400. But the laws of physics did not care about size when leverage was involved. She used his own strength against him, redirected his own momentum, and now he was airborne, spinning through the air with a look of complete disbelief on his reptilian face. The sixth second was filled with the sound of Torvax trying to understand what was happening. He had been in fights before, many fights, but they had always been against weaker creatures who cowered and begged, not against someone who moved like water and hit like stone. His brain could not process what his body was experiencing, and by the time he realized he needed to do something to protect himself, it was already too late. In the seventh second, gravity took over. Torvax came crashing down onto the metal floor of the dining hall with a sound like a bomb going off, and the impact drove all the air from his lungs and sent shockwaves of pain through his entire body. Two of his arms were pinned beneath him at bad angles, and he heard something crack that was probably important. The eighth second saw Kira land on top of him, her knee driving into his throat with just enough pressure to make breathing very difficult, but not quite enough to kill him. Her eyes were locked onto his, and there was something terrifying in those human eyes, something ancient and patient and absolutely without mercy. This was the gaze of a predator, he realized with horror. A real predator from a world where death was always just one mistake away, and he had made a terrible mistake. In the ninth second, Kira spoke, and her voice was calm and quiet, but somehow more frightening than any roar. "Stay down," she said, and it was not a request. The 10th second was the longest of all. It was the second when Torvax Kren, son of one of the most powerful families in the galaxy, bully and tyrant and terror of the Academy, looked into the eyes of a human girl and finally understood what a Deathworlder really was. He understood that Earth was not just a dangerous planet, but a nightmare world where everything was trying to kill everything else all the time. where creatures hunted each other through jungles and deserts and frozen wastelands, where even the plants could be deadly. He understood that humans had not just survived on that world, but had conquered it, had risen to the top of the food chain through sheer determination and adaptability, and an absolute refusal to die. He understood that this girl, this small, soft-looking mammal with her strange flat face and her forward-facing eyes, was the product of an evolutionary arms race that made his own species look like children playing with toys. And he understood, with a cold certainty that settled into his bones like ice, that he had just made the worst mistake of his entire life. "I yield," he whispered, and his voice was raw and broken. "I yield, please." Kira held him there for another moment, her knee still pressing into his throat, her eyes still locked onto his, and then she nodded once and stood up. The entire dining hall was silent, so silent that you could hear the ventilation systems humming and the distant engines of the station vibrating through the walls. Thousands of aliens stared at the scene before them, at the mighty Torvax Kren lying on the floor with his arms bent at wrong angles, at the small human girl standing over him without a scratch on her body. 10 seconds was all it had taken. 10 seconds to go from predator to prey. 10 seconds to shatter every assumption the galaxy had ever made about humanity. Kira took a deep breath and looked around at the watching crowd, and she saw the fear in their eyes, but now it was mixed with something else, something that looked almost like respect. "Is there a medical facility on this station?" she asked, her voice carrying through the silent hall, "because I think he needs some help." And just like that, the spell was broken. Aliens began to move again, began to whisper to each other, began to pull out their communication devices and send messages to friends and family and news organizations across the galaxy. Something had happened here today, something important, something that would change the way the universe looked at the strange little species from the Deathworld called Earth. And at the center of it all stood Kira Vasquez, 18 years old, first human to attend Galactic Integration Academy, wondering if she was going to get expelled on her second day. Security arrived within minutes, a team of 6 officers from 3 different species, all of them carrying weapons that hummed with dangerous energy. But when they saw who was on the ground and who was standing, they stopped in their tracks and looked at each other with confusion. The lead officer, a tall Volanthi with pale blue skin and silver eyes, approached Kira slowly with her hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. "Human," she said carefully, "I need you to tell me what happened here." Before Kira could answer, dozens of voices began talking at once. Aliens who had witnessed everything rushing to explain, to defend her, to tell the security officers that she had only been protecting the little Mafari. "The Dralis started it," someone shouted. "She told him to stop. She gave him a chance to walk away," another voice added. "He attacked her first. She was only defending herself." The security officer held up her hand for silence, and then she looked down at Torvax Kren, who was still lying on the floor making small sounds of pain. "Get a medical team in here," she ordered one of her subordinates, "and someone contact the Academy administration. They are going to want to know about this." While they waited for the medics to arrive, the security officer turned back to Kira with a look that was part curiosity and part fear. "I have never seen anyone move like that," she said quietly. "How did you do it? How did you beat a Dralith in close combat?" Kira shrugged, trying to look casual, even though her heart was still racing from the adrenaline. "On Earth, we have a lot of martial arts," she explained. "Ways of fighting that have been developed over thousands of years. I've been training since I was a child." The officer blinked her silver eyes in surprise. "You train your children to fight?" she asked. "We train them to defend themselves," Kira corrected. "Because on our world, you never know when you might need to." The medical team arrived then, floating drones and worried-looking doctors who gathered around Torvax and began scanning his body with devices that beeped and flashed. The head doctor, a Volanthi named Dr. Saurus, looked at the readings with wide eyes, and then looked up at Kira like she was seeing a ghost. "Two of his arms are broken," Dr. Soros announced, her voice shaking slightly. "And he has fractures in 3 of his ribs, and there is significant bruising to his throat. How is this possible?" She began pulling up information on her medical tablet, searching for data about humans and their capabilities, and what she found made her take several steps backward. "Ancestors preserve us," she whispered, and then she projected her tablet's display onto a large screen so everyone could see. The display showed Earth's planetary classification, and the numbers made several aliens gasp out loud. "Class 12 world," Dr. Soros read, her voice loud enough for everyone in the hall to hear. "Surface gravity of 1 standard G. Atmospheric composition of 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen." "Oxygen?" someone in the crowd shouted. "They breathe oxygen. That is a corrosive gas. That is poison." Diosaurus nodded grimly and continued reading. Extreme temperature variations ranging from -90 degrees to 60 degrees. Active geological processes including volcanic eruptions and tectonic plate movement. Severe weather patterns including hurricanes, tornadoes, and electrical storms. "Wait," a Crick student interrupted, clicking their mandibles nervously. "Did you say tectonic plates, as in the ground itself moves?" "Yes," Kira confirmed. "We call them earthquakes. Sometimes entire cities get destroyed." The Cricks fainted on the spot, simply collapsed like someone had turned off a switch. But Dr. Soros was not finished. "Native fauna includes apex predators with mass exceeding 1,000 kilograms," she continued. "Venomous species numbering in the hundreds of thousands, parasites, pathogens, and a category of predator unique to Earth called persistence predators." She looked up at Kira with an expression of complete horror. "What is a persistence predator?" she asked. Kira thought about how to explain it in a way that would make sense to creatures who had never experienced Earth's unique brand of biological warfare. "Most predators on most worlds rely on speed or stealth or ambush," she said. "They catch their prey quickly, or they give up and try again later. But humans evolved differently." She paused, looking around at the hundreds of faces staring at her. "We are not the fastest creatures on our planet," she continued, "and we are not the strongest. And we do not have claws or fangs or armor, but we have something else. We have endurance." "Endurance?" the verse repeated. "We can walk and run for hours, for days if we have to," Kira explained. "Our ancestors would pick a target and follow it, never stopping, never resting. Just following and following and following until the prey was so exhausted it could not run anymore. Until it literally dropped dead from fear and fatigue." The room had gone completely silent again. "We have a word for it on Earth," Kira added with a small smile. "We call it jogging." Another Crix fainted. "You chase things until they die of exhaustion?" Dr. Soros asked weakly. "Sometimes," Kira admitted, "and sometimes we would trap them or poison them or set them on fire. Humans are very creative when it comes to killing things." A Volanthi student near the back of the crowd raised a trembling hand. "Is it true that your species swims in dihydrogen monoxide for recreation?" they asked. "You mean water?" Kira replied. "Yes, we swim in oceans and lakes and rivers all the time. It is one of our favorite activities." "But it can kill you," the student exclaimed. "Almost everything on Earth can kill you," Kira said simply. "We learned to live with it." The small Mefari that Kira had saved came forward slowly, their big dark eyes filled with wonder and gratitude. "You saved me," they said in a soft voice. "You could have been hurt or killed, but you saved me anyway. Why?" Kira knelt down so she could look the little alien in the eyes. "Because where I come from," she said gently, "we protect people who cannot protect themselves. We stand up to bullies, and we do not let fear stop us from doing what is right." The Mafari stared at her for a long moment, and then they did something that surprised everyone in the room. They hugged her. And as Kira hugged them back, she noticed that the other students were looking at her differently now. Not just with fear, but with something that looked a lot like admiration. Maybe this academy was not going to be so bad after all. One standard month had passed since the incident in the dining hall, and everything had changed. The video of Kira's fight with Torvax had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Viewed billions of times on every major network and shared on every social platform. And suddenly, everyone wanted to know about the strange little species from the Deathworld called Earth. Kira had become famous overnight, her face appearing on news broadcasts and educational programs, and even a few entertainment shows that wanted to interview the human who defeated Adralith in 10 seconds. She had turned down most of the interview requests because she did not want to be famous. She just wanted to be a student, but the attention was impossible to escape. The Academy administration had reviewed the security footage and the witness statements and had ruled that Kira had acted in self-defense, which meant no punishment for her. But Torvax Kren had been placed on academic probation and ordered to attend anger management counseling. His family had been furious at first, threatening to pull their funding from the academy and use their political connections to cause problems. But then they had seen the video. They had seen their son, their pride and joy, their future heir, lying on the ground, whimpering, while a human girl half his size stood over him without even breathing hard. And they had decided that maybe it was better to stay quiet and let the whole thing blow over. Torvax himself had recovered from his injuries after a few days in the medical bay, but something had changed in him, something fundamental. He no longer walked through the corridors like he owned them. He no longer shoved other students or mocked them or threatened them. He kept his head down and his mouth shut, and whenever he saw Kira coming, he would turn and walk the other way as fast as he could without actually running. Some people said he had nightmares about the fight, that he woke up screaming and covered in sweat, dreaming of those calm brown eyes that had shown no fear, only patient calculation. Kira felt a little bad about that, because she had not meant to traumatize anyone, but she also knew that Torvax had brought it on himself. The bigger change was in how the other students treated her. That first day, they had stared at her with fear and whispered Deathworlder, like it was a curse. But now they said it with respect, with admiration, even with a little bit of awe. Students who had avoided her now sought her out, wanting to sit with her in class, wanting to eat with her in the dining hall, wanting to hear stories about her impossible planet. Is it true that Earth has creatures called sharks that can smell a single drop of blood from miles away? A Crick student asked during lunch one day. Yes, Kira confirmed, and they have rows of teeth that regrow when they fall out, so they never run out. Terrifying, the Crick said happily. Tell us more. Well, there are also jellyfish that can kill you with a single sting, and octopuses that can change color and squeeze through any space larger than their beak, and birds that migrate thousands of miles every year without getting lost. What about the persistence hunting? Another student asked eagerly. Can you really run for days without stopping? Not days, Kira laughed, but trained humans can run for many hours. Our bodies are designed to cool themselves through sweating, which lets us keep going long after other creatures would overheat. Sweating, someone repeated with disgust. You leak fluid from your skin to regulate temperature. That is revolting. It works, Kira shrugged, and it helped our ancestors survive. The little Mefari that Kira had saved, whose name was Pip, had become her closest friend at the academy. Pip followed her everywhere, sitting next to her in every class they shared, walking with her through the corridors, telling everyone who would listen about how brave and kind the human was. She saved my life, Pip would say proudly, and she did not even know me. She just saw someone in trouble, and she helped. That is what humans do. Kira was embarrassed by the hero worship, but she had to admit it was nice to have a friend. The Galactic Council had taken notice of the incident as well, and they had quietly upgraded humanity's threat assessment from primitive developing species to monitor with extreme caution. Some council members argued that humans should be quarantined on their death world and never allowed to spread through the galaxy. But others pointed out that humans had already proven themselves capable of space travel, and it was only a matter of time before they developed faster than light technology on their own. Better to bring them into the galactic community now, while there was still a chance to form positive relationships, than to wait until they came out on their own, possibly angry about being isolated. Kira did not know about any of these political discussions, and she probably would not have cared even if she did. She was too busy studying and making friends and trying to figure out how to pass her xenobiology exam. But she did notice that the academy staff treated her differently now, with a careful politeness that bordered on nervousness. And she noticed that when she walked through the corridors, she no longer walked alone. There were always other students around her. Students who had been bullied by Torvax, or students who had simply been too scared to stand up for themselves. And they looked at her like she was some kind of guardian angel. "You changed things," Pip told her one evening as they sat together watching the stars through a large observation window. "Before you came, everyone was afraid of him. And now they are not, because they know that size and power do not always win." Kira smiled and put her arm around her small friend. "I did not change anything," she said. "I just did what anyone from Earth would have done. We do not let bullies win. It is not in our nature." "Maybe that is what makes your species special," Pip said thoughtfully. "Not your strength or your endurance or your Deathworld adaptations, but your refusal to accept unfairness." Kira thought about that for a moment. She thought about all the humans throughout history who had stood up against oppression, who had fought for what was right even when the odds were against them, who had refused to bow down to tyrants and bullies. Maybe Pip was right. Maybe that was humanity's real superpower. Not their bodies, but their spirits. "You know what?" Kira said finally, looking out at the endless stars. "I think we are going to do okay out here in the galaxy." "I think so too," Pip agreed. "And I think the galaxy is not going to know what hit it." They laughed together, human and alien, friends from different worlds, looking out at a universe full of possibilities. Humanity was just getting started, and the stars had better be ready.